Hi everybody, my name is Elizabeth. I'm with World's Cup of Joe, Awaken Your Soul, where we help guide you through your twin flame journey as well as your spiritual ascension. I want to welcome you to our Soul Love Through Literature mini-series on the classic novel, The Great Gatsby. Last week in our first episode, we introduced why I believe that this novel is really a story about a twin flame connection, with Gatsby being the positive or push polarity, while his love interest Daisy is the negative polarity. As a recap, J. Gatsby, or the Great Gatsby, is a very wealthy man that is known for his extremely lavish parties during the 1920s. He has befriended a new neighbor named Nick, who is the cousin of Daisy, Gatsby's love interest. Gatsby wants Nick's help as a third party to arrange a meeting between himself and Daisy, as it's been over 5 years since he's seen her, and she has since married. Gatsby, while dating Daisy, was a poor military man, though he worked hard as well as inherited money, all for one purpose after the separation, and that was to be worthy, he felt, to win Daisy back. Everything he has done and accomplished over the last 5 years has been for one purpose and one purpose only, and that is to win Daisy back. Gatsby also described a period in his life that I believe was his dark night of the soul, and that is when he went off to war and he welcomed death. He no longer wanted to live with the pain that separation from Daisy had caused, as he kept referring to that point of his life as the very sad thing that happened to me. This episode, we are going to focus on both the backstory behind Gatsby and Daisy's relationship, as well as the first meeting that transpires between her and him, with the help of Nick coordinating the encounter. Nick hears from a mutual friend of Daisy and his, Jordan, firsthand about the love affair from years prior. First quote. "One October day in 1917, said Jordan Baker that afternoon, when I came opposite her house that morning, her white roadster was beside the curb and she was sitting in it with a lieutenant I had never seen before. They were so engrossed in each other that she didn't see me until I was 5 feet away. The officer looked at Daisy while she was speaking in a way that every young girl wants to be looked at some time, and because it seemed romantic to me, I have remembered the incident ever since. His name was J. Gatsby, and I didn't lay eyes on him again for over 4 years." Jordan had mentioned that Daisy was one of the wealthiest girls in the area. She had often frequented places where she would meet officers from Camp Taylor, but it was this specific lieutenant and the way he looked at Daisy that made an impression on Jordan. Jordan says that Gatsby looked at her the way every young girl wants to be looked at. Gatsby, it sounds like, immediately after meeting Daisy, was already in the twin flame addictive energy. Daisy was, of course, in the bubble phase, which means that Gatsby could be obsessive and addictive and it wouldn't yet repel her. Jordan continues to tell the story of what happened between her friend Daisy and Gatsby. Next quote. "Wild rumors were circulating about her, how her mother had found her packing her bag one winter night to go to New York and say goodbye to a soldier who was going overseas. She was effectually prevented, but she wasn't on speaking terms with her family for several weeks. After that, she didn't play around with the soldiers anymore. By the next autumn, she was gay again, gay as ever. In February, she was presumably engaged to a man from New Orleans. In June, she married Tom Buchanan of Chicago with more pomp and circumstance than Louisville had ever knew before." There's a couple of reasons I included these specific passages. The first is to show how much Daisy was in love with Gatsby. She was so angry that her family wouldn't let her say goodbye to him before he left to go overseas that she didn't talk to them for weeks. But I want to now show how she was able to get over this. Jordan says that by the next autumn, Daisy was happy again and engaged to be married. This would not be the case with anyone other than the negative polarity. The push polarity gets stuck on the pull twin, like Gatsby did, while the pull twin can move on with their life in the 3D. Gatsby lived every day for the 5 years he didn't see Daisy, pining over her and coming up with ways not only to see her again, but to elevate himself in society to a position that would be worthy of her in his mind. He couldn't stop thinking of her and couldn't move on and date anyone else. Daisy, however, had her sad moments with Gatsby leaving, but brushed it off, continued her life, and even managed to be happy again and get married. But Jordan explains that Daisy's wedding day was not the excitement and happiness that a bride should or likes to think about. She started having cold feet on her wedding day because she was thinking about Gatsby after reading a letter she had received from him. Next quote. I was a bridesmaid. I came into her room and found her lying on her bed, as lovely as the June night in her flowered dress, and as drunk as a monkey. What's the matter, Daisy? I was scared, I can tell you. I'd never seen a girl like that before. Tellin' Daisy's changed her mind. Say Daisy's changed her mind. She began to cry. She cried and cried. She wouldn't let go of the letter. She took it into the tub with her and squeezed it up into a wet ball. But the wedding ended up proceeding as planned, and Daisy was happy as ever after the wedding. Jordan says, I saw them in Santa Barbara when they came back, and I thought I'd never seen a girl so mad about her husband. Working with twin flame positive polarities, I know one thing for certain. They can't let go of their person. The connection essentially makes them stuck in a place where time stands still with their feelings for their twin, much like Gatsby's did over those 5 years. But the negative polarity can continue to live their life in the 3D and be happy. Daisy is showing, by being able to move on, get married, and be happy for a period of time, she is the negative polarity in this connection. Gatsby, on the other hand, could not move forward. He thought of Daisy every day over the years of separation and had one thing only that he aimed to do with his life, and that was be reunited with her again. Jordan finishes telling Nick the story from Daisy's perspective, and then how she connected the dots that the Gatsby that had lived across the bay from Daisy was the same Gatsby that she saw so long ago in the roadster that day with Daisy. It was a strange coincidence, I said. But it wasn't a coincidence at all. Why not? Gatsby bought that house so that Daisy would be just across the bay. He wants to know, continued Jordan, if you'll invite Daisy to your house some afternoon and then let him come over. The modesty of the demand shook me. He had waited 5 years and bought a mansion where he dispensed starlight to casual moths so that he could come over some afternoon to a stranger's garden? Did I have to know all this before he could ask such a little thing? Well, he's afraid. He's waited so long he thought you might be offended. Why didn't he ask you to arrange a meeting? He wants her to see his house, she explained, and your house is right next door. I think he half expected her to wander into one of his parties some night, went on Jordan, but she never did. This passage explains that Gatsby had two intentions when buying the house across from Daisy, and that was to see her again and have her know that he had made it. He didn't want to just meet her. He wanted her to see his house and know that he was now worthy of her. I want to also point out what a big deal to Gatsby his seeing Daisy meant to him. Nick thinks that Gatsby wanted him to invite Daisy over as a small favor, but you can feel that Gatsby is emotionally distraught over even requesting this. The positive polarity will continuously make their counterpart higher in their minds and put them on pedestals. They will think that they need to change, whether it's looks, intellect, job status, financial worth, all to be able to measure up to their twin. But they are already equals. In fact, I'd like to go out there and say that the positive polarities are even more favored because they are the ones that are awakened. You don't need to change anything on the physical or your material worth to be a counterpart for your twin. You just need to be in soul. You have the one thing as the awakened twin that they cannot find anywhere else, and that's your connection to soul and the energy that transmits from you when you're aligned. That's a powerful gift. After Nick finds out this backstory of Daisy and Gatsby's relationship and the favor that Gatsby has requested of him, he arranges for Daisy to come over for tea. He doesn't divulge what the occasion is, but he tells her to come alone without her husband. The day of their meeting arrives, and to say that Gatsby is in mind and a mess would be an understatement. An hour later, the front door opened nervously, and Gatsby, in a white flannel suit, silver shirt, and gold-colored tie, hurried in. He was pale, and there were dark signs of sleeplessness beneath his eyes. Gatsby looked with vacant eyes through a copy of Clay's Economics and peering towards the bleared windows from time to time as if a series of invisible but alarming happenings were taking place outside. Finally, he got up and informed me in an uncertain voice that he was going home. "Why's that?" "Nobody's coming to tea. It's too late." He looked at his watch as if there was some pressing demand of his time somewhere else. "I can't wait all day." "Don't be silly. It's just 2 minutes to 4. He sat down miserably as if I had pushed him, and simultaneously there was the sound of a motor turning into my lane. Can you feel the anxiety and fear that Gatsby is emitting? He comes over to Nick's house looking like he hasn't slept, and do you blame him? This is the moment he has been agonizing over for the last 5 years. Everything he has accomplished and worked for has led him to this moment. I like the term used to describe his eyes, vacant. This word is so telling that he is in mind. He's not present and he can't get out of his head. He is so much in mind that it's not even time for Daisy to arrive and he is already looking to escape. His fear energy was getting the best of him. Nick lets Daisy in when she arrives, only to find that Gatsby is nowhere to be found. "Well, that's funny," I exclaimed. "What's funny?" She turned her head as there was a light, dignified knocking at the front door. I went out and opened it. Gatsby, pale as death, with his hands plunged like weights in his coat pockets, was standing in a puddle of water, glaring tragically into my eyes. I included this lead up to show the energy that is surrounding Gatsby and this meeting. It's thick and penetrating and so relatable to any twin. The first time I met my twin in person, we had already been talking on the phone and messaging each other for almost a month. He was in Florida and I was in Arizona. I had planned to take a flight to meet him for the first time, and I couldn't stop counting down the hours until I left for Florida. And then once there, to say that I was panicking would have been a very liberal term. I was more nervous than I had ever been before. I felt almost like I couldn't breathe. And then once we were together and he had picked me up from the airport, it was a new sensation of nervous energy that penetrated every part of my being. I couldn't look at him or make eye contact. I didn't know how to handle myself, and I'm usually a pretty calm and composed person. So reading about Gatsby, it's like reliving that day all over again. Sheer panic mixed with an overwhelming, unquenchable desire. For half a minute, there wasn't a sound. Then from the living room, I heard a sort of choking murmur and part of a laugh, followed by Daisy's voice on a clear, artificial note. "I certainly am awfully glad to see you again." Gatsby, his hands still in his pockets, his distraught eyes stared down at Daisy, who was sitting, frightened but graceful, on the edge of a stiff chair. "We've met before," muttered Gatsby. "We haven't met for many years," said Daisy, her voice as matter-of-fact as it could ever be. 5 years November. The automatic quality of Gatsby's answer set us all back at least another minute. Wow. So much in these few exchanges. It suggested from the words used that Daisy was hesitant in meeting Gatsby. She was frightened but graceful, on the edge of a stiff chair. Doesn't sound very inviting, does it? Does his push energy have anything to do with this, or is it just because she's surprised after all this time to see him? Gatsby almost seems offended with his comment, "We've met before," and Daisy responding casually, "Well, it's been many years." Remember, to the pole polarity who continues their 3D lives, time continues for them. But to the push polarities, like time stands still, with feelings and emotions tied to their person, it can be 20 years and it will feel like you were with them yesterday. Time seems to stop, and that's because you're one soul and there is never separation. That same emotional and energetic feeling never ceases to the push polarity. Daisy says, "It's been many years," to which Gatsby responds immediately with a countdown, 5 years next November. The push polarity will remember every date, everything of significance, and even those of little significance when it comes to their twin. This passage is great insight into the difference in how the two polarities view time and meeting up after separation. After the initial awkwardness, the energy in the room started to disperse from fear into one of genuine enjoyment. They were sitting at either end of the couch, looking at each other as if some question had been asked or was in the air, and every vestige of embarrassment was gone. Daisy's face was smeared with tears, and when I came in, she jumped up and began wiping at it with her handkerchief before a mirror. But there was a change in Gatsby that was simply confounding. He literally glowed. Without a word or a gesture of exultation, a new well-being radiated from him and filled the little room. I love the change that comes over Gatsby in this passage. He went from vacant eyes, pale as death, to now glowing and radiating well-being. Daisy has revived him. This is how it feels to be in the midst of your twin, in their presence. It is like a lifeline has been sent to save you. It feels like a renewed sense of peace, satisfaction, will to live, all wrapped up from the external place of your twin. Unfortunately, the good feelings that Gatsby is experiencing, since they are being felt and delivered externally from Daisy, always bring with them that he can get just as low as he is now high. He is resting his well-being on how she receives him. This is the problem that comes with this journey and so many push polarities get stuck in. They want to be validated and seen and to feel complete through their twin instead of seeking it within, which is the only true place those feelings can permanently reside. You don't find yourself from your twin. You find yourself through your alignment with soul. Your twin doesn't complete you. They complement you. There is a distinct difference that many can't differentiate when they're stuck in a place of addictive energy. In getting Daisy to Nick's house, Gatsby had the intention of showing her his home. He wanted her to see that he had financially made it. Here is Daisy's reaction when she saw his home. "That huge place there?" she cried, pointing. "Do you like it?" "I love it, but I don't see how you live there all alone." He hadn't once ceased looking at Daisy, and I think he revalued everything in his house according to the measure of response it drew from her well-loved eyes. His mission to show his worthiness was complete when Daisy had seen that he had made it. After showing her the house, he went and showed her the grounds of the home. "If it wasn't for the mist, we could see your home across the bay," said Gatsby. "You always have a green light that burns all night at the end of your dock." Daisy put her arm through his abruptly, but he seemed absorbed in what he had just said. Possibly it had occurred to him that the colossal significance of that light had now vanished forever. Compared to the great distance that had separated him from Daisy, it had seemed very near to her, almost touching her. Gatsby bought his house for the purpose of being close enough to Daisy that she may come and see him. He had spent years looking across the bay and seeing the light, and it essentially being a leak for him. He now no longer needed to look at this light as a third party or a reason to think of her when he now was close to her in the physical. The light was the closest he came to her, but now things had changed and he was with her in person. As I went over to say goodbye, I saw that the expression of bewilderment had come back into Gatsby's face, as though a faint doubt had occurred to him as to the quality of his present happiness. There must have been moments even that afternoon when Daisy tumbled short of his dreams, not through her own fault, but because of the colossal vitality of his illusion. It had gone beyond her, beyond everything. An outsider to a twin flame connection like Nick would think that Gatsby would be somewhat disappointed in Daisy in the flesh, as he built her up so much over the past 5 years in his mind. But we, as positive polarities, know that is far from the truth. Our twin always meets our expectation when we are with them. It goes beyond the imagination. They are God in its purest form to us. Unconditional love that cannot adequately be conveyed to anyone else. They are us. They are love of self expressed in the form of another body. It's something that can't be described unless you have experienced it. But I'm going to guess that Gatsby was not disappointed that evening. More likely he was getting caught in mind, and that was what was translating to Nick. In fact, I feel like he was home for the first time in years near Daisy. They had forgotten me, but Daisy glanced up and held out her hand. Gatsby didn't know me now at all. I looked once more at them, and they looked back at me remotely, possessed by intense life. When you're with your twin, all things around you are inconsequential. They can't touch you. It's as if you are in a protected bubble and nothing can enter or disturb your space. Gatsby, after 5 years, got to feel this again. I will end this episode here with Gatsby at the height of happiness being reunited with Daisy. Thank you for joining us, and I hope you return next week.